he is a survivor and has, in his short life, because he's in his early 20s, has already survived and gone through overcoming addiction. And he's going to talk to you also about what his experience was with self-harm. And it's a topic that we don't talk a lot about among us here in the council, although it does fall under a form of abuse, right? It's harming ourselves. And he's going to talk a little bit about his life and his experience and how he overcame that. And hopefully those hearing him will be able to use something from his story, either in their own personal life or perhaps with the clients that they are serving in the jobs that they have. So we are very, very, very excited to have him with us. And later on, we'll also hear from Dr. Jacquelyn Christensen, and she will have her own introduction. But for now, I'm going to hand it off to Anthony. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, of course. It's my pleasure. It's good to see you again, Joanne. So I'll be honest, I don't really have like a written form of criteria. Honestly, I think that the best shares just come off the head for me. So I'm going to start with my early years growing up. I'm born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. And unfortunately, growing up, I endured a lot of very, very just heavy bullying from my peers, from people at school. And I didn't really know how to handle it. You know, when I was that young, I just, being told repeatedly, like, you know, like things that made me feel like trash, it made me start to believe that I was, you know, and unfortunately, I didn't really have the cognitive thinking that I do today where I can like, you know, put together that, you know, those people were just hurting me because I feel like to some extent they were hurt or they were going through their own stuff and they just projected it. But at the time, it just felt so like like matter of fact and certain that I was less than and I was garbage, you know. So I just I really internalized all of that and I started acting out by sneaking out at night, going to hang out with people who I probably shouldn't have been hanging around. Um, because I felt like those were my friends. And, you know, I'm a very social person and I love hanging out with people. And I don't know, I would do whatever I could to just hang out with people because I felt so alone. I'm an only child and, um, you know, no kid comes with an instruction manual. So my mom figured it'd be best to just ground me. And whenever I was grounded, it was no screens and no hanging out with anybody. So no TV, no music, no phone, no hanging out with people, no video games, no nothing. It's just me, my room, and like books, you know? Um, so I started to get into a lot of trouble by acting out. And I spent most of my days in my room and just driving myself crazy. And that, with paired with the bullying, just spiraled me into this really, really just gnarly depression where it was like I was living life with like a black and white filter over my eyes. Like, sure, there was color, but I just couldn't see the beauty in it because I just felt like I don't want to be here. Like, this world was not made for me. And so I had heard about self-harm and I decided to try it because why not? I wanted the outside to match how I felt on the inside. And I also wanted to, there was a certain beauty that attracted me to seeing my own blood come out of my skin. And I apologize if I'm being a bit graphic, but you know, that's just the reality of like self-harm is it's very real. It's not anything to minimize and it can get really, really scary really fast. So I would take apart razor blades, like like stuff you shave your face with. I'd take those apart and I would just drag it across my skin, and roughly 2 seconds later, my skin would be open and I would see a little pool of blood start to form. And I was just like, wow, like this makes me feel something other than what I'm currently feeling. So that was the initial attraction, was, it was somewhat of an escape for me. I got like an adrenaline rush. I felt like I was actually alive, because, you can't be alive and feel, that kind of pain. So it was very attractive to me. And I started to wear long sleeve sweaters in the middle of summer to try to cover up my self harm. And I remember the first time my mom found it was when I was about to take a shower. I walked out of the bathroom without a shirt on, and she just absolutely shattered. Like, I actually just absolutely shattered her, because she had no idea what was going on. And, I'm her kid, and she didn't realize what was going on. And I don't know, I just remember the look in her eyes. Like, she felt, it looked like she was just so defeated. Like, like, what more can I do? And I felt really bad, so I stopped. But by stopping, was around the time that I got introduced to weed, like marijuana. And then all of a sudden, I replaced self-harm with drugs, which in my opinion is still self-harm, because I was damaging my lungs. Now, sure, bodies are resilient, but it was still messing up my mental way of thinking. So from there, I started getting into even more trouble, because I would come home smelling like weed, and my mom was not having it. So I would continue the cycle of getting grounded, self-harm, and eventually, after I want to say like 3-4 years of this, just constant stuff happening. And I don't mean to sound like, oh, like, woe is me, like things happen to me. Why, it was, I put myself in certain situations. And then there was, of course, like the bullying. I was not really anybody that was special. And I mean, nor that I didn't try to be anybody special, but like, you know what I mean? It was very hard for me to make friends, because people were like, that kid's, a loser. Like, why would I hang out with him? So, uh, yeah, I tried, I had three, what are they, essays, suicide attempts. I had three of those where I just seen it in movies where people would hang themselves. So I tried, and very, very blessed that I didn't actually work, because I tried to hang myself in the garage, and my mom opened the garage door like not even a minute later, coming home from work, and she just saw me like dangling. She just freaked the hell out, and sorry, excuse my language. She freaked out, slammed the car to a halt, and was like just sprinting towards me, like just crying and like just so confused. And I didn't really want to be saved at the time. So I had self-harmed before that as well, like just cutting myself. And yeah, she got me down. She called 911. I was 5150, put into like a mental hospital with people that I felt like I couldn't relate to, because nobody else at the time was there for suicide attempts, and I just felt really alienated. So I got out of there, and I tried to swallow all the pills that I was prescribed. I was like, well, I'd rather just go to sleep and never wake up, and then it won't be such a horrific death. Trying to minimize it, and that didn't work. I ended up just throwing it all up, and my mom again took me to the hospital and got admitted back into the mental asylum, or what, I forgot what it's actually called. I just call it the loony bin, honestly. But yeah, so after I got out of there, I was probably around 14 or 15. And then I got out, and then it was just off to the races with my drug career. I just started smoking a bunch more because I was tired of hurting my mom, like putting her through that emotionally. And just, it was just all like, I just felt really selfish, like nobody raises a kid and wants that kid to just kill themselves, so I felt really selfish, and just felt like I was showing that I was ungrateful for the life I was given. And it's really just because of me not knowing how to properly manage my emotions. And so, yeah, I guess I'll just jump into that. So how I overcame this line of thinking was, I'd been admitted into drug rehabs, which are really good at telling you a bunch of different solutions as to why you might use drugs in the first place. And then they also offer a lot of solutions on ways to fix your thinking or switch your thinking. So I was taught a lot of lessons on like cognitive behavioral thinking, ways to manage stress. I was put on the right meds that I feel like were right for me, antidepressants. And I was also in a lot of group therapy, which I feel like there's a lot of power in group therapy, honestly. Getting to talk about stuff and finding real solutions from other people who also feel the same but are way too scared to talk out about it is like, I don't know, it's just a really beautiful thing. There can be a lot of really good work there, but that coupled with therapy, lots of therapy one-on-one with my therapist, and counseling, and just basically being active in my program, was just all of those things honestly just created the perfect like remedy to help fix me. And it was a lot of mental work. Like there was a lot of mental work, there was a lot of crying, there was a lot of breaking down, there was a lot of just admitting that I have an issue and I have a problem, and I'm like, I'm not the things that I was told growing up. I am worth it. I am a human, and I deserve every bit of life that this world has to offer me. And I was just selling myself short by my past behaviors, and I don't know, I just had really crazy tunnel vision in those times. But therapy is definitely something that really works, as long as the person who's in therapy is willing to let it work and is willing to admit some really deep things. So sorry, I'm a little scatterbrained right now, trying to think about, I feel like there's more stuff I wanted to talk about, but I'm kind of blanking out. But yeah, just a lot of mental work and growing up and maturity really helped. And also medication really helped, because I was told there's a physical chemical imbalance in my head where my brain cannot produce enough dopamine or serotonin. And all meds do is help level that out so that I can be in a headspace for me to be able to manage emotions without feeling so gloomy and dark and just overall just shitty. So I think that's all I have for right now. I hope that was helpful to somebody. I really hope that if anybody's struggling with it, or they have kids or family members or friends, close friends that are struggling with suicide and also self-harm, to just honestly be there for them. If they need to vent to you, don't take it as them being annoying or just trying to like bitch about something that doesn't matter. Like, it matters to them. It really does. And you taking the 20 minutes to answer that phone call really could make all the difference to them. Yeah. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And it was an honor to be here. Because I don't know, this was kind of cool.
I'll step in real quick. Thank you so much for sharing. Can you guys hear me?
Of course.
Goodness, sorry, I'm having all the technical difficulties today. Thank you so much, Anthony. I'm so proud of you, and I'm so excited to see your continued success. And thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story with us. This is the first time Anthony ever speaks about his story, so we're very, very honored. And I hope you have a chance to read the comments in the chat, and maybe you can stick around because there might be some questions. If anyone has questions for you, they can stick them in the chat as well.
Yeah, I'll be here. I'll be here.
Okay.
Of course. Don't hold back. I am an open book, and I'll just be honest as possible. So yeah, shoot away. Thank you.
Yeah, we are so grateful, Anthony, and there are so many people in the chat box who offered their gratefulness, commending you on your strength, the resiliency, for sharing your story today.
Oh, well, thank you guys. It really means a lot.
Yeah, and just, I don't know if we shared earlier, but we have a variety of members of the San Diego Domestic Violence Council, from youth serving agencies to domestic violence counselors, law enforcement, criminal justice, child welfare services, adult protective services, just a variety of service providers, and also some advocates. So we so appreciate, bringing up a topic that we don't talk about very often. And so again, thank you. And we are so honored that you were willing to share your story for the first time publicly. So again, Thank you so much. I'm looking to see if there are any specific questions other than everyone just saying thank you, thank you, thank you. I believe that someone did ask for your contact information. So Dorian will reach out to you.
Okay.
And
should I just put my phone number in the chat, or?
If you are willing, please, you can share your.
Just a fair warning. Please text me, like, say, hey, this is whoever from the meeting, so that I'm able to know, like, okay, this isn't just a spam person texting me, because I do get a lot of those, unfortunately.
Is it easier by email then?
Either text or email. I'll put them both.
Okay. Okay, so maybe Dorian, if you could put Anthony's email address. Oh, I just wanted to share a comment that young people need to hear your voice of healing. So just the value of having young people hear your story.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm typing my email right now, and I'm really bad at typing and saying. Otherwise, I start typing what I want to say. But thank you so much. Like, this honestly is really, it means a lot to me. Like, I know that, like, everybody's like, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. But that's just not true. I feel like you react mentally the way you would if you were physically smacked in the face. And it's not really something that people want to admit, especially I see in like guys, because we're supposed to be masculine or whatever. But no, like, screw that. Like, we have feelings too. And like, it really sucks when it's just a nightmare when somebody thinks that a razor blade is going to solve the answers and fix whatever is actually hurting us. It's just it's a very shitty place to be in, and it's not for attention. I mean, I'm sure it exists somewhere where somebody does it for attention, but the majority of the time it's not. It's because that person is hurting in a way that they have no idea how to even try to manage it, and that's just the quick fix.
you've inspired so many people today, and it sounds like people will
Thank
be
you.
reaching out to you, so that there can be more people who can be touched by your story. Thank you.
Of course.
So we invite you to stay if you're able to. You
Yeah,
don't have
yeah, I'll
to share your camera if you don't want to. But we wanted to go ahead and welcome our next presenter. And so I was introduced to Dr. Jacquelyn Campbell by a very good friend of mine, Pam Hansen from the San Diego Center for Children. And I believe that you provided them a much longer presentation than you'll be able to today. And so what we'll have today is just a touch of all of the resources and information that Dr. Christensen has for you. So let me read her bio. Dr. Jacquelyn Christensen is an applied developmental psychologist who conducts training and program evaluation for professionals in a variety of settings. So community-based mental health, education, primary care, and child welfare settings. She focuses her work on stress and resilience, regulation, and highlighting the importance of brain-body integration in understanding behavior. So that is just a snippet of Dr. Christensen's expertise. And are you able to share your screen?
Yes, I hope so. Hi, everyone. Anthony, thank you so much. That was amazing. And now it's a really tough act to follow, to be honest, because I'm just going to turn it all academic, which is just not nearly as, it doesn't have the power, in my opinion, of I mean, there's a little bit in there, but it's not quite the same. But hopefully, and if you don't mind, I may actually relate a couple of your examples to the content, just to kind of help connect the two, if that's okay with you.
Oh, absolutely.
I took some notes because you were sharing. So. Okay, can everyone, I hope, let me turn this to share, see my screen.
Yes, you can see your full screen now.
Okay. All right, so let's see, is this, I don't want my little pictures to get in the way. So if it blocks, somebody tell me and I'll move it. Okay, so as she mentioned, there is a much longer version of this as a full day training. So what I did was I just pulled out a snippet, but hopefully you guys find it helpful. And absolutely, if there are things that I don't touch on, please put your questions in the chat box and I'll do my best to answer those questions. So what I'm really going to do, I'm going to take about 30-35 minutes to kind of zoom through some of this, and then we can hopefully there's a few minutes for question and conversation. I'm actually going to open by discussing a paradigm shift in how we think about behavior. Then I'll give you just a little bit of, defining and looking at prevalence of non-suicidal self-injury. Really thinking about why a trauma-informed lens, or I like to say a stress-informed lens, is really important. Sort of a tool that I'll give you to sort of walk away with today is just thinking about states of arousal and how we define toxic stress. And I'm then going to connect that back to non-suicidal self-injury, and then how we can support youth and young adults, and anyone really, via relationships. Okay, so I know that this is going to be a lot. Let me move this. I provided, hopefully everybody's able to get the materials that I sent out today. So I provided a larger version of this for you. This comes from the Neuro Relational framework. It was put together by a woman named Connie Lillis and her colleague Janice Turnbull. And I do a lot of work with Dr. Lillis. She does a lot of training in Los Angeles. She has sites throughout the USA and Canada. And the essence of it is really thinking about how we use the brain as a template for thinking about behavior and individual differences. But one of the things that has been really crucial that has come about as part of this work is really shifting the status quo. So this sort of center star is us thinking about the status quo. And then the blue star here is what we want to shift to. Okay, so what I'm going to focus on today are just these first two. So the first is, again, if we're thinking about behavior, is that oftentimes behavior is thought about as compliance versus non-compliance. This is very much what's used in education and the juvenile justice system. It's very much what we use when we think about reward and punishment. It is, you know, when Anthony talks about his mother grounding him, right? It's, what do I do? You're not complying with the rules, right? And then that moves us to reward and punishment, right? So if you comply, we give you rewards. If you don't do what I need you to do, you get punished. And that misses some things, because what we're missing is we're missing what is happening in the body, and we're missing the safety of relationships in that. So the lens that I'm talking to you guys through today, that lens, is really shifting our understanding of behavior. If we look at something and we say, why is this person being non-compliant? Why aren't they doing what I asked? That this is really about, does this person feel safe? Are they under challenge, or are they under threat? Okay. Combined with that, if we identify that they're under threat, how do we provide relational safety instead of just rewarding or punishing the behavior? Okay. Again, there's a lot more to this, but we don't have as much time. So let's talk about defining non-suicidal self-injury. So again, the focus of today is just deliberate self-injury that's not life-threatening and that does not typically have any suicidal intent. Again, in a longer version of this, I could dive into differentiating between suicide and non-suicidal self-injury. There's definitely a relation, but it's not a one-to-one correlation. So most people who self-harm are not suicidal. That doesn't mean they might not get there, but just because we see someone self-harming, we can absolutely do a screening and we absolutely should assess, but we don't want to jump to that conclusion initially. While we often think of self-harming as a symptom of pain, it's really that person's own intervention for them to try to deal with what's happening, right? So that's sort of the lens that we're taking. Anecdotally, in this picture, it's kind of hard to see here, but the word hate is carved into this young man's arm. And he was about 15 when he carved the word hate into his arm. He was in a fight with his mother, and he yelled at her, and they were yelling at each other, and he went in his room, and he came back out, and he carved hate in his arm, and he said, "This is what you made me do. This is how I feel." And if we were to look deeper, we would see that his mother had just been diagnosed with cancer. She had just been diagnosed with lung cancer, and he had a lot of pain going on. And she actually, about 2 years later, she did pass away. And it took him a while he struggled to get on his feet. I met him when he was, how old was he? 19 or so. And so, hearing his story, and hearing Anthony's story, in both of these cases, right, they talk about their self-harm as something that they were doing to help manage what was going on, okay, and deal with it. So just as for those who are less familiar, it's really hard to get a pinpoint number on how many adolescents self-harm. So I'm going to focus on adolescents. I like to think of it as if you had about 10 kids, about 4 of them have thought about it. So we're looking at about 40% of youth in a community sample. So if you go to your random sort of middle school, high school, about 40% have thought about it. About 15% approximately have tried it once. So, 1 to 2 of them have said, I've heard of it. I should try that out. Of those who try it out, it's a much smaller percentage that continue. And years ago, I did my dissertation actually looking at non-suicidal self-injury in adolescents. And I had started from a behavioral approach. I had started looking at, well, how do they learn about this? I looked at Albert Bandura. I said, why are they doing this in the first place? Is it because social learning theory, social cognitive theory? And then it wasn't a good answer. It wasn't enough, because there was some reason that some kids continued to do it and lots did not. And that actually led me down a path of looking at the sensory aspect, to see if there were, looking at the individual differences for why this method of self-regulation continues to be useful or viable or successful for this particular, those individuals. And when Anthony said, the visual aspect, seeing the blood and how that felt for him, there's a sensory component to that. So we do know that there's actually a slight increase in college students. So again, you're looking at a time of shift and change and stress in young folks and young adults. Again, a few more just facts here. Most youth who engage in non-suicidal self-injury are going to start between 12 and 15, somewhere in there. So it's not enough if we're really looking in high school. We need to be looking in middle school. And again, I don't think Anthony said exactly how old he was when he first did it, but based on when he was doing the suicide attempts, that was about 14, 15 years old. So I'm guessing Anthony 12, 13 or so, when you were trying the non-suicidal self-injury. Generally speaking, for most people, most young adults and young adolescents who self-harm, it's usually impulsive. Usually they don't feel pain while they're doing it. They're usually not on drugs or alcohol. And there's usually sort of a trajectory of feelings. So usually there's either overwhelming feelings or numbing feelings preceding it. There's usually feelings of euphoria or escape or sort of overwhelming feelings while it's happening. And then sometimes it can be mixed in with sort of a negative cycle of either guilt or shame or relief at the end. And then that cycle can perpetuate over time. There are some gender differences. Girls are more likely to report it. They're more likely to do it when they're by themselves. Cutting is the most frequent form of self-harm. But what's really relevant, I think, to the conversation today and to you guys as an audience is that girls are more likely to have a history of trauma like assault or PTSD or anxiety, and boys are more likely to have anxiety or depression. So this is going to relate when I start talking about arousal states. But when we think about witnessing domestic violence, when we think about issues of power and control that come up, and the feelings of powerlessness, doing this to oneself offers a sense of control as well. And so that can also be combined with these feelings, again, also for individuals who have experienced things like bullying, things like domestic violence, abuse or assault, feelings of worthlessness as well, or not being worthy. So this is taken, there are various versions of this. I turned it into this visual, but there are pyramids that look like this. So if we think about why a trauma-informed lens is so important, early experiences of all varieties, right? So traumatic experiences, adverse childhood experiences, social injustice, things that are stressful in the environment, such as issues around community safety, and our own individual differences. Again, in my in some of the research I've done, I found that individuals who self-harm were more likely to have visual and auditory sensitivity than their peers. So thinking through just what an individual might bring to the table, combined with what happens in their environment, and you get sort of, when we think about intersectionality or how experiences overlap in that way. So some combination of these factors, right, could potentially, doesn't always, potentially result in toxic stress, and I will operationalize that for you. And an overwhelm of stress in our bodies is going to impact our development. So it's going to impact our brains, our neurobiology. It's going to impact our ability to interact with others, so social, emotionally. And it's going to then, because our brain is impacted, impact our learning and our behavior. Okay. And this is why we have that paradigm shift, that we want to stop thinking about compliance and non-compliance, and we really want to go upstream and say, what's happening in the body? Right? What's happening in the brain and what's happening in the body that is preventing this person, this child, this young adult from focusing, from learning, from engaging in a healthy way with the world around them. And when these factors sort of pile on, that's when we start seeing these health risk behaviors. So we start seeing things like non-suicidal self-injury. We see things like behaviors that lead to eating disorders. We see drug use, right, for example. And over time, right, without any sort of intervention, without social supports, that's when you start to see that breakdown, right? If you're looking at like the reverse outcomes of the ACE study, right? The disease, disability, fractured social networks, so relying on greater needs for social services, homelessness, etc. And then this, right, is going to work itself backwards, and this is when you get intergenerational effects. So I'm going to take a moment here and just talk to you about states of arousal. So this is your body. So I can't see all of you, so I'm not getting your facial feedback right now. But if I was, I would look at your eyes, I would look at your face, I would look at your body language. And if I can ask all of you to notice your body language for a second. Okay, so like, how are you sitting? Are you standing? Walking around? How's your breathing? Okay. If you are in a calm, alert state, I would notice that you had bright, shiny eyes, a relaxed face. You would be alert. You would be looking at the camera. You'd be looking at me. You'd be looking at this presentation. You'd be paying attention. And we're going to call that green zone. It's when our nervous system is in a place of balance. Okay, of homeostasis. But we're not like that all the time because that'd be weird. It'd be a little like Stepford Wives. We'd be just green all the time, but we're not. We get tired, we get irritated, we get upset, we get scared, and that's okay. Now notice I'm going to really talk about the body, but you overlap emotions onto this. It's not the same thing as emotions. I will make that clear up front. This is about the nervous system. So I could be green and I could still feel sad about something. I could hear a sad story and go, oh my God, that's so sad, right? I can still have that emotion or feeling and my body is still calm, okay? However, we can only sustain this if we also go through good periods of deep sleep cycling. So if any of you are in the business of supporting youth and kids who potentially self-harm, do check into their sleep as well. I didn't ask Anthony how his sleep was when he was an adolescent, but oftentimes we might see some disruptions in sleep, and that impacts our ability to be green. Now, we should have a beautiful array and capacity for different stress responses. So if you know, something really upsets us, irritates us, we are frazzled, right? We might go into what we call red zone. If we are zoning out and kind of maybe we're on our way to sleepy, for those people who are dissociating a little bit, right, you get blue zone. So maybe if you've been on presentations on Zoom all day long, you might be a little glassy-eyed, staring into space, staring through me a little, right? If you're like that, then you're a little blue zone. If you're, hopefully nobody's red zone on here right now, but could be. And then if something has frightened you, right? Or if you are feeling really tense, you may be in combo zone. So we shift to other zones, and that's all normal and that's all typical. We're like, you know, our nervous system is like a rubber band that is meant to go and come back, go and come back. Okay. Where things go awry and what we're defining as toxic stress. Again, this is based on the work of Bruce McEwen and the Neuro Relational framework, is that if we have a hard time coming back to green, if we go too often into some of these other zones, if we stay too long in some of these other zones, or we just get stuck there. If we were to make a pie chart and say less than 20% of our day or our week is in green zone, we may be stuck there. And that's toxic stress. Okay. And I think it's really important because we talk about toxic stress sort of ephemerally all the time. But when we start to operationalize it, it can really help us think through what's happening with this person's behavior. And so if we think about this person's behavior and say, is this behavior a stress response? Is this person feeling safe or are they under threat? Okay. And if we can ask that question and go, oh, this kid is totally red zone right now, right? I have a 5-year-old. She's been sick for a week with a stomach flu. She's been pretty red zone today, combined with blue zone. She's having a hard time being in green zone because she hasn't eaten in a week, right? So she's hangry. She's very, very hangry and she's sick. So I have to keep telling myself when I start to get red zone, because she's doing lots of yelling, hey, this is a kid who's really sick. She's not able to regulate her body. Okay. She's having a hard time being green. And so she doesn't need to be punished. She doesn't, right? She needs compassion and she needs a relationship. So, you know, when Anthony is talking about the bullying, when he was talking about feeling disconnected, when he's talking about feeling worthless, when he's talking about feeling depressed or zoned out or needing to feel something, he was not green, right? He was potentially blue zone. He may have been combo zone. I don't know. I wasn't there, but he was not green, right? And so what we're finding for adolescents and anyone really who self-harm, non-suicidal self-injury is generally being used to get someone from one of these states back to green, right? Or to a zone they feel more comfortable in. I'll give that caveat as well. Okay. So why do they engage in non-suicidal self-injury? One of the biggest pieces there is thinking about safety versus threat. If they feel safe, if a child feels safe, they're probably green, they're probably able to learn, they're probably able to connect. If they feel under threat, any kind of under threat, including feeling disconnected, okay? So feeling like nobody cares about me, nobody wants to be with me, nobody thinks I'm worth it. When they feel that disconnection, our brain processes that as pain. There's plenty of psychological research out there that says feeling excluded, feeling left out also results in us experiencing pain in our brain. Our brain processes it like pain. Okay. So if we are feeling under threat, then we're going to feel, then we might be in one of those other zones. Okay. And this aligns with a lot of the research out there on the functions of NSSI. So when individuals say, I need to feel something. And so you even heard Anthony say that. I wrote it down. I was like, hey, look, we didn't talk beforehand, right? But there it is, to feel something. So again, that potentially being in blue zone when he talks about being depressed, right? If we need to feel something, we want to come back to feeling alert and engaged. Alternatively, to make the pain go away. I'm feeling so overwhelmed. I'm in so much pain. Possibly I'm in red zone. Possibly I'm in combo zone. And I just need it to turn off, right? I'm so dysregulated. I'm going to use this to downregulate. Okay. The other reason is communication. And I'm not going to write that off as to get attention, though that kind of falls under it. But I don't think anyone just goes, I'm going to do this and get attention. No. Even the communication piece is connected to the regulation piece. Okay, so there are those folks who say, I need somebody to see me. I need somebody to accept me. I need somebody to know that I'm here. That would be the communication piece. But what can be driving that is also regulatory, right? Because if you feel not accepted, if you feel left out, if you feel hurt, those negative emotions in relation to other people are going to be then connected to how you're feeling in your body. Okay. So if we take all that, again, I just sort of gave you the really fast version of thinking through what's happening in our body and what could be happening with a youth who's engaging in non-suicidal self-injury. And again, you think about kids that have been exposed to domestic violence, right? And their combo zone, their blue zone, right? They zone out, they go into fight, flight, ready? So fight, flight, that's your red zone. Your freeze is your combo zone. Freeze is also the flat and freeze would be more blue zone. Any of that our body is going into means that we're not green, we're not alert, we're not engaged. The other problem is that if we're not green, we're going to have a hard time connecting with someone else. And really, the only thing that's going to help that is to have somebody else be green and help start bridging that connection. Two people who are not green are going to have a really hard time connecting. You know, so I think it was really hard for Anthony and his mom because she wasn't sure how to help him. And, you know, when he would see how sad she was, sometimes that impacted how he was feeling, but it didn't fix the problem, right? So he said, well, I stopped self-harming, but then I switched over to drugs, right? Because he was still trying to figure out, how do I get myself back to green? And his mom was struggling with, how do I help him get there, right? And she wasn't sure how to do that. Again, based on what I heard. So family support is actually really important, because the more supported a child feels, the more that they can help come up with other ways for that child to get regulated. Okay. So even a simple, again, if you can get a non-judgmental conversation, supported conversation going between the parent and the child, disclosure of non-suicidal self-injury by the youth to parents can actually improve coping, because all of a sudden that child feels like they have a partner. Okay, and that's huge, because that child probably feels very alone. And this can be really hard, again, if you're in a situation where the child's having a hard time either with both parents, or both parents are not safe, or, you know, there's only one parent they can lean on. So again, a therapist or some sort of facilitator can be really important here. If it's a case with a child in the foster system, you know, if there's a supportive foster parent, if there's another supportive adult that's a mentor, an aunt, an uncle, something like that, that can even get the ball rolling. Okay. But finding that natural support is critical. So, you know, if I were to really boil this down to steps that can be taken, again, it's such a diverse audience here, it was hard to say, well, I can't just start talking about like therapeutic treatments, because not everybody here is doing therapeutic treatments. I would say here's some people like things that are easy to remember. Here's 3 C's to keep in mind. So one is compassion. So you know, I have resources. I list resources on the next page for more formal assessments. You know, how to ask questions of youth who may be engaging in an SSI, but at the very basic, showing empathy, being free from judgment, and really using authentic listening, I think is crucial. And a lot of that is examining your own attitudes and beliefs about non-suicidal self-injury, because kids and teenagers are really nifty, and that they can pick up on your vibe real fast. So they'll know if you're not authentic, they'll know if you're not genuine, they will know if what they're telling you is turning you off, right? Like if they're trying to tell you something and you're like, oh, they're gonna clam up. So part of that is your own work, right? To be able to talk about that. Connecting with them. I think really the most important piece is that you're sharing your calm, and you need to be green. So you can't go into that conversation being red, being anxious, being, you know, zoned out, being worried about your next meeting. You have to be present for them. I also recommend, and this is important for building connection, if you're supporting a dyad, so if you're supporting a parent and child, or any other dyad in that way, have them share a sensory experience. And what I mean by that is, share a meal together, go on a walk together, play on a swing set together. And trust me, lots of teenagers love to go on swing sets, so it's not just little kids. Do something, play some basketball together, whatever it might be, that doesn't involve words. Truly, that can make a big difference. And again, help build some of those natural supports. And lastly, be curious. You do want to consider, you know, what is contributing, what is triggering this child to feel unsafe, right? Is it that they're never going to feel safe in their house? Well, that's a problem if they live there, right? So how can we help them feel safe the best we can? Thinking about behavior as communication, they're communicating to you whether they feel safe or under threat. Okay, and we want to ask, when is this person green? Are they green when they're at your office? Are they green when they're at school? Are they green when they go to a community center? And how do you know they're green? The bright, shiny eyes, the sense of calm exuding from them, right? Or are they never green? And if that's the case, then you're really going to have to start from the ground up. And it could be through group therapy, and it can be through medication, and it can be through CBT, right? There can be all the tools put into place, right, to help that person figure out, how do I get to green? So here are some resources for folks who are interested. The SOARS assessment tool, I feel, is really helpful because it just lays out a set of 5 things to think about when you're asking questions of youth who are engaging in an SSI. There's lots of resources at these various websites if you're into reading longer books. I believe that ISSS, they call themselves ISSS. They even have a podcast on it, if that's of interest to you. Again, I do a much longer version of this, so if any of you you know, want me to, if you have an organization and you need me to talk to them, I'm more than happy to do that. But I do want to open up to questions. I've seen the chat number going up, but I haven't looked at any of it. But I'm going to stop there so I have time to answer some questions for folks and dig in deeper to anything that folks have questions about.
Yes, we have a couple of questions, and thank you so much, Dr. Christensen, for sharing a very complicated and challenging topic in a way that was just very clear and easy to remember. And thank you for being flexible with our audience, because we're not all therapists. And so this was just really so helpful to understand some of the backgrounds and then the approach. So thank you, the trauma-informed approach. And I also appreciate your journey of thinking about it one way and then looking at the neurobiology. So that was just really wonderful insight to share with us. So one question that we had from one of our participants was to ask, what recommendations do you have when working with minorities and or Latino clients in regards to their children engaging in self-harm? So in their experience, it can be hard for parents to understand the seriousness of the behavior, and it could possibly lead where it can lead if it was ignored or minimized. So
Sure.
What feedback do you have?
So one of the things I will say is that take it away from the behavior first, because the behavior itself, the self-harm, absolutely is either laden with assumptions. Here's, you know, people only know of it from movies, or you know, why would they do this thing? Why would they hurt the, you know? And start by really taking it back to, and I've done this with lots of parents, take it back to the colors, and actually help relate it to the parents themselves. So if you are interested, you're welcome to email me, and there are actually a whole slew of tools that go with this. and one of the places we start when we work with parents, and I have a colleague, she works in a residential facility for adolescents, and she loves using this stuff in the residential facility because teens totally get it. And then we use it with lots of parents, with young children, with teenagers, with all sorts of folks. And starting by helping the parents think about themselves first is actually really, really helpful, because again, you're taking away beliefs about the behavior, and you're really just starting with, let's talk about our bodies. Let's talk about what it means when we're under stress. What does that look like, right? And you can start with really simple things like, in the morning, do you like someone just to turn the light on, or do you like it to go slow, right? And some people will be like, oh no, don't turn the bright light on, that'd be terrible. Well, what happened if I did? Oh, I'd be so upset. Okay, your body would go from sleep straight into rut zone, right? And so you start them thinking about their own stress responses in their body. And once they can do that, then relating that to the stress responses in their kid. And I think it creates a non-judgment laden sort of equal playing field for everybody to just start talking about the colors. And once you get there, then you can say, so now that we know what's happening in our body, let's talk about the ways that your kid is dealing with when they're red or when they're blue, right? And this has been generally successful. You know, I've worked in South LA, I've worked in the Valley. You know, when I was doing a lot of the stuff in Los Angeles, I've had, clients from all over. We use this stuff in Alaska. We all in the early intervention program in Alaska. So there's a lot of indigenous families there who use it. And truly bringing it down to what's happening in the body has been the most successful strategy that we've used, because it's not that we can't then have deeper conversations about what it means to them and their family, and what assumptions do they have about those behaviors, and those conversations absolutely should be had. But it can help take some of that judgment away, even if it's being like ignored or minimized, right? Because then you can say, well, this is some of what your kid is doing to cope. Let's talk about it, right? So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank
Yes.
you. Then we have a follow-up question. It sounds like one of the concerns are when the caregiver, the parent is under distress and they are in survival mode. So they're not in that green zone.
Nope.
So how do you support those families?
With more support. I mean, that's the hardest thing, right? It's really hard support from an empty cup. So, I would say it's sort of a dual pronged approach to how can you get as much support for that caregiver as possible, right? Whether that's through therapy or other natural supports, or, financial. I mean, again, it makes it so hard because a lot of things I'm listing makes it sound like it's the quote unquote fault of this person, when they're probably living in systems that are stacked against them, right? And that's really, really challenging. And so some of it's going to really feel like swimming upstream for a lot of our parents, to really get them the support they need. But doing your best, right, to find ways to help them be as green as possible. Additionally, helping the child get some other natural supports in place if possible. So if the parent's not able to do it, is there, again, some other relatively positive adult in that child's life? If you have to go outside of that, could it be through like a brother and sisters program, right? Just something, right? So that there is some healthy, positive mentor-like relationship happening for that child. And then again, in a beautiful, perfect world, some sort of dyadic therapy between the child and the parent would be amazing, right? Again, if you could get them, I know we use CPP often for young children, but there's no reason that you can't do it with older kids too. So.
Thank you so much. We have a lot of appreciation in the chat box. Thanking you for your presentation. I do have one more question. It sounds like there may be situations that are ongoing, struggling for a child, such as when there's an older sibling that's hard on a younger sibling. So how do you support that kind of challenge within a family?
Right. That's really tough because there's so many reasons that could be the case. So I'm going to have to speak really vaguely because there's so many factors, including the age difference, gender differences, whenever we look, so I'm going to speak really vaguely for a second and say, whenever we're looking at a child's behavior, we should never really just look at that child. We should always look at a dyad or triad. But we want to look at that child's behavior in the context of a relationship with someone, right? So we can look at that child's behavior. So if, let's say we're looking at the younger sibling, what does this child's behavior look like in context to the older sibling? What does it look like when one of the parents is present? What does it look like when the other parent is present? What does it look like just between the older sibling and the parents, right? So having, one of the therapists I work with, had a case where it was like one-on-one with the parents, relationships were great. All of a sudden you put both siblings together and the mom and everything fell apart, right? So there can be some fabulous complexity, right, to really taking apart those relationships. Again, therapy can be really critical there. But that's where really trying to take it apart. And when we say, hard on a younger sibling, part of it is really digging in. What's happening with the older sibling? Why is this child doing this? Again, if this is a situation with DV, is there, again, a power situation at play where they've seen this behavior modeled, and so they're exhibiting power and control over their younger sibling? And then thinking about if they're being hard on them, then probably this older sibling's not green, and why not, right? And so how do we get older sibling to green? How do we help younger sibling get green, etc.?
Thank you. And it sounds like we just have so many questions for you, but I think this will have to be the last one. And thank you to everyone who provided your email address if you weren't already on our mailing list. And we'll be sending out Dr. Christensen's email address. But I do have one last question, and it's about what do you do while you're waiting? The client is on a wait list for therapy. And so how do you support them in the meantime? They need support. They're experiencing NSSI, and it's an urgent situation. What is your advice for that client and the therapist?
I would say if you're able to look at some of the resources that I provided. Again, you can look at the SOAR checklist, but if you're farther in than that, a lot of it really is about listening. There's when I do the longer presentation, and I can actually, let me see if I have it here. I do talk about there exists an entire world of simulated, they're actually ASMR, which is autonomous sensory meridian responses. People like to hear sounds. There are ASMR videos that are role play videos of, there's one where it's like a nurse and another one where it's just like supposed to be somebody's friend talking to, again, just the camera, right? Acting like they're talking to someone who's having an NSSI episode. And so they're saying, oh, tell me what happened, and they're doing a lot of listening and they're exuding so much empathy, right? Just as part of this video. What is most impactful about that is when you read the comments. So these are both just on YouTube. You have people saying, I just wish somebody had listened like that to me. It would have been amazing if someone had just so non-judgmentally been so kind and caring and just heard me, right? And so I think one of the pieces there, you know, if they're on a wait list, even if it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever it might be, what can you do to help that person feel heard, feel worthy, feel wanted? You know, again, you can look through those different resources, but depending on how much time you're able to spend with that person, right? Start at the bottom, start, you know, when is this person green? You could even talk to them about the colors if you want to. You can email me, I can give you, you know, the worksheet on that. But helping them just think, like, ask them a question. When do you feel the most calm? When does that happen for you? Right? And say, what can you do this week to help you get there? What are 3 things you can do to help you feel a little bit calmer this week? Right? Or just notice, right? Just noticing your body. So just be a source of support and empathy, I think, is just the best thing you can do. Again, I don't know all the details, right, on what you have happening, but I'm going to stop the share for now. But hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christensen. Just so much appreciation in the chat box, and we just appreciate your expertise and your sharing and your compassion as well. Thank you. So just wanted to let everyone know we appreciate you on the call, on the work that you do with families. And for all of you who provided your email address, if we didn't have it already, we will send Dr. Christensen's handouts. We've also recorded this session, so if you missed any of it, it will be on our YouTube channel, and that link will also be sent out to everyone as well. Probably be ready by about Wednesday. So again, thank you to everyone. Again, we extend our greetings from Claudia Grasso, who couldn't be here today. Again, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.